Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're all about the positive vibes here on the show, and I've got a very special guest with me. He is the second youngest to have held the ECW World Television title. He has worked a lot of different promotions across the United States. Pleased to welcome the one and only Glen Osbourne to the podcast. Glen, welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm humbled.
Yeah.
It's really a pleasure to be here. I love the theme of this podcast, spreading positivity. That's in short supply sometimes these days. So, I'm glad to see you out here and getting that out.
I appreciate that. Thank you again.
Sure.
Let's talk about your upbringing and childhood. You're from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about what was your childhood like?
It was difficult. I think a lot of people that I, over the many years, got to be friends with. I think a lot of us that got into it had a little bit of maybe a different kind of upbringing. My parents got divorced when I was really young, and it was an odd situation. My dad wasn't really around, and then when I was 7 and I saw wrestlers on TV, it was a whole new world, and these were guys that you could look up to, at least back in the day, it seemed. But yeah, and without that kind of male role model in my life, the wrestlers that I saw on TV and at the arenas, they filled a void that I needed, and that's what got me into the gym and doing my thing, and then I wound up getting into it. So yeah, that's a real short version, but so that's it pretty much. Lifelong fan. I got started right after high school. Pretty much, I went to art school for a semester. It wasn't really for me, and then I wound up going. A lot of my early years in wrestling coincided with my college education. So I was in college a little longer than most because of my wrestling schedule, because I wanted to be able to balance it. So that was an interesting twist too. But yeah, so the wrestlers really were guys that I could look up to that were, what I saw as, real men, protector type guys. So I was drawn to that. I wanted to be that. And so I started getting into the gym when I was very young, and everything took off from there.
Who are some of your favorite wrestlers to watch growing up?
Oh man, I think, like, as far as in-ring workers, Bobby Eaton is right up there. I mean, he's one of the all-time best. Bret Hart, Ric Flair, Barry Windham, guys like that. I loved the Road Warriors. I really liked I like the ass kicking guys, but I also like the guys that could wrestle, and there was such a variety back then of different styles. So yeah, guys that I don't necessarily wrestle like, I really like Bobby Eaton or Bret Hart, or guys like that were so good and so
very
smooth. Technical, and everything was so believable. You could feel, when they would take their bumps and take their hits, you were right in there feeling it along with them. It wasn't the no selling, that has its place, but I like the realism that guys like that brought. So I tried to kind of have that in my own approaches, to try to make things look as legit, as rough as possible. So
it's always good to have that kind of grounded approach when it comes to in-ring work in wrestling. And so
yeah,
it's pretty cool that you were able to take some of those influences and put your own spin on it. And
yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and back when I was coming up a million years ago, the idea was you were going to work every night. So you learned, I think, kind of how to pace yourself. it wasn't always, TV and just that's one thing that amazes me today to run with the ball like that on a national stage all the time. I mean, that takes something to do that.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah, and you have to really get in that mindset of how can I how can I get better? How can I
Absolutely.
where do I see myself in the next 5 to 10 years? How can I carry the
Yeah.
ball and go and
Yeah.
make something with this? And you've had a heck of a career, which I want to delve into. You
Sure.
mentioned a bit
Thanks.
ago you went to the gym, started training. I've had a lot of people talk about the training process on the show. What was your experience like as far as training is concerned?
Um, I started training in the gym when I was 14, and so I had some years in the gym under my belt. And I started thinking seriously about getting into wrestling when I was maybe 16 or 17. After I had a little bit of that under my belt, I was starting to get a bit of muscle, and and I got into wrestling through Joel Goodhart's. I don't know if some of these names, Joel Goodhart. He promoted the TWA in Philadelphia
Hmm.
back in the late '80s and very early '90s, and he's the promoter that broke me into it. The training for wrestling was probably a lot like what you've heard. A lot of cardio work, the gym where we trained. It was a big gym in Northeast Philadelphia, and the wrestling school was in the back. So it would get really hot in the summer. It's probably like every cliche you've heard, cold in the winter, hot in the summer. But it was a good ring we learned in, and the trainers. I had excellent trainers. But it's tough, man. When you're bumping over and over and training every night and bumping and working like that, it's an education for sure.
And it teaches you so much about life too, like how to get along with people and
Oh yeah. I can't imagine if I had never left my hometown. I mean, that's cool too. But I've gotten to meet so many different kinds of people from so many different backgrounds. Um, you learn so much about people. I find it makes you not as judgmental. You're more open to all different types. You run into all different types in the wrestling world. So you probably know some of the people you've interviewed, just a lot of
hmm
characters.
yeah. And
So,
when you first came up into the business, when you first started training, anybody come up to you for pieces, that gave you some pieces of advice that kind of stuck with you throughout your career?
oh yeah, my trainers, Larry Winters and Ron Shaw, Larry Winters more especially, um, would just little things. It's the little things, like as far as in ring work, move this way a little more that way. I remember one time I was wrestling Jimmy Giannetti, who was an old friend and rival of mine from years ago and over the years, and we were rookies and we were booked on a show in New Jersey, and there was a set. We were brawling out on the floor in front of the crowd, and we got done. Bam Bam Bigelow was on the card, and he said to us, we were the young guys, and you know when you're in front of the people like that, lay it in. You gotta. So little things like that stick with you over the years. I said on another podcast, you work with so many people and a lot of big names, and if you can take something from everyone you've worked with and put it together, every match you have, no matter who it's with, is a chance to learn. But in those days, the big names they took an interest in the younger guys like us, and they would impart some of that wisdom to us. So that was really cool.
Yeah, it just seems like you had mentioned, you definitely get an education when you're on the road, you're traveling and you're working from
Yeah,
city to city, night after night after night. It really
yeah.
just it gives you more exposure, which is important.
Yeah, yeah. I wish some of the guys of my generation and onward had some of these, with YouTube and all these other avenues you can take now to get exposure and to get your name out. I mean, we really didn't have any except for building your name in front of the crowds where you worked locally, or TV was, if you could get TV, that was great. If not, but magazines, like that was really it. That's all we had. I wish some of us had a chance to become celebrities via the YouTube and all these other things. That would have been cool.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a different world now than it was
Yeah,
back then. But
yeah,
but magazines, man, you talk about you talk about looking at different wrestling magazines and different wrestlers that were on it. The PWI is
Yeah.
one that is still so iconic. And were you ever featured?
Yeah, they had a match. They had a family of magazines. PWI was the flagship. They had the Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Sports Review Wrestling, and Wrestling USA. I think I named them all. So yeah, I was lucky to get a lot of magazine coverage in the 90s. I'm very thankful for that. And I had a match against Mankind McFoley, and I guess this was like 98 or whenever he was doing that gimmick real big. And I had a match with him in Delaware for the ECWA. That got a whole article done on it with pictures and the whole thing. So that was really cool. And match results and articles and they would do the PWI 500. I think they still do
Mm-hmm.
that. Back when that seemed to mean a lot more, because it was back then. Again, it was an avenue for exposure that a lot of us needed.
Yep.
Now that's not really important, but then it was. So yeah, so I had a good relationship with the magazines for a long time. They put pictures of me and stuff in. That was neat.
Yeah, I mean, see, you were able to get out there and you were able to put on uh, a show and wrestle so many different guys. You had mentioned Mick Foley. What was it like working with him?
That was great. I knew him from 1990 in the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, TWA, promoted by Joel Goodhart, mentioned earlier. He would come work for that promotion for Joel. So I got to know him then. And then years down the line, I was on a bunch of shows with him then. And then I got finally to work with him when he was doing the Mankind gimmick. There was a period in the 90s where WWE would let their talents go out and work on the independents. So because of that, I got to work. They let their guys go work for reputable promoters. They're not going to send them to somewhere where it might be stupid or they might get hurt. So I got to work with a lot of WWE names and other big names. I was so fortunate because of that. Guys they need to keep their stars busy. So hey, go work some independent dates. I got to work with a lot of guys like that. So that was pretty cool.
Who were your favorites to work against?
Ooh, probably the biggest legend that I worked with the most is probably Jimmy Snuka, I worked with him over a period of 11 years probably, at shows just all over the place. We just would hook up. We worked really well together, and he was so incredibly smooth in the ring. And just despite all the controversy here nowadays, to a lot of us, he was like a kind older brother or a kind uncle kind of figure. Um, but when I got to work with him, a lot of these guys, he had come right out of WWE. Like this was her like 92 probably, and I was just a young kid, so I got to develop, and work with him so many times, and it was just so cool. Him and a lot of independent names that were great. Geez, there's so many. Ivar from the Raiders was excellent. There's so many. I know I'm leaving a ton of people out, but I apologize to anybody that I'm not mentioning. Um, there's been so many. I forget.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like you worked against so many different names over the years and had such
Yeah.
an incredible career. You had a run in ECW in the early days of the promotion. As I mentioned at
Yeah.
the top of the podcast, the second youngest reigning ECW World Television Champion. How was that experience for you?
That was really interesting. That was right. I was with ECW when they started the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, which I mentioned, Joel Goodhart's TWA, went out of business, and then Todd Gordon picked up ECW right after that. So a lot of us guys from the TWA got picked up by the early ECW, and then it started. I was there probably right until about the switch over. Paulie was there, but he hadn't taken over everything quite yet. So Eddie Gilbert was booking then. But it was really neat. I mean, even before TV, there was a really good following for ECW. The early TV tapings were a little rough, but otherwise, It was really neat. That's a great laurel for me to have on my resume, and it happened when I was so young, But it was cool, scary but cool.
Why did you decide to leave? I mean, it was just an incredible, iconic promotion.
It's a lot of us mainly were kind of pushed out when Paulie started getting more. There was a whole group of guys that were Philly guys that really started it. Names like Tony Stetson, Johnny Hotbody, Larry Winters, who trained me, DC Drake, Mad Dog DC Drake. These guys really started the hardcore wrestling thing, like really put it on the map in Philadelphia. um they didn't create it, but they brought a new level to it. And I'll go on record as saying that the fact that those four names aren't hanging on the banner of the legends in the ECW arena is a crime.
Hmm.
But I was used well. I had the TV title. We started doing the TV tapings. Eddie Gilbert was booking at that time, and I he had a change of heart on me. I don't know if it was because Paul E was starting to get the book, but systematically, one by one, the Philly guys like myself who helped start it were phased out, and I knew my time had come because Eddie Gilbert. I started with the TV title, and then it wound up with him a match where he whacked me on the back with a cane. I took a bump, and he covered me with a boot in the chest. And I said, "That's it. This is not." I saw the writing on the wall and got it. I got out. I had to leave because I
Oh,
was trying to build a career.
yeah.
Getting pinned that way is not going to help.
It's amazing how that promotion really set the tone for hardcore wrestling, and to see what it
Yeah,
became later, it's
it was
mind blowing.
amazing. Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, I mean, and I think one thing people forget is they did present the hardcore stuff, but they presented a lot of great wrestling, a lot of the high flying. The hardcore really took center stage, but it had something for everybody. I find most of the promotions I've worked for over the years that are successful will have that, like something for everybody. You
Yeah,
know,
and that's always important to have that. And you also did a lot of work on the independent circuit. What was that like?
that was interesting. I liken that to being in like a band or something, and you're on the road. And I've always said, like, I got into this to be a working wrestler. You kind of got into it then, like, I think kind of not that our outlook on it was any better. It was just different in those days. So like you got into it as a like to work. If you got to the big time, that was great. But it was about working and working as much as you can and trying to make some money. And so you do. I traveled a lot on the independents all throughout the '90s. Things started to change in the very early 2000s with the independent circuit, but it was, I mean, again, an education like second to none. You just meet all kinds on the independents.
And you kept going until 2011.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I'm again very fortunate to say I never really had trouble getting booked. So I could kind of pick where I wanted and not. And as time went on, you kind of want to stay closer to home and everything. So that worked out. So eventually it just took care of itself. I got out because my back had gotten really bad. And I still, am dealing with physical things from years. I don't think the general public understands how much wrestlers take punishment wise. The entertainment end of it takes over, which is fine. It is entertaining, but you do put yourself through a lot,
It
So
it's grueling, not to mention the travel.
yeah, that I don't miss. The traveling, the waiting, all that kind of stuff was not fun. Being in the ring and being around the fans and the other guys and stuff, the boys, that was great. That's the stuff I miss. Being and going out and performing and stuff, but definitely not being in the car for hours and hours and being in a different place all the time. But it's a young man's game, so God bless them who do it today.
Have you decided maybe trying another kind of role, like commentating or booking
Yeah, I
or
would be open to something like that. There was a long time where I probably wouldn't have been. Yeah, something like that would be cool. I did like one seminar, a few years back. That kind of stuff would be cool. I definitely would like to. I've trained guys over the years, so wouldn't mind getting back into that end of it a little. Working with the young talent. I trained. I don't know if these names will mean anything. I trained Nate Hatred. Um, uh, Geez, I was the original trainer of the Briscoes, myself and Eddie Valentine. And then they went out and achieved great things, not because of just us. We got them started, and then they just learned from more and more people till they became, fantastic.
Superstars.
Oh yeah, man, I couldn't believe it. It's just about a little over a year since Jamin passed away. So,
That's
that's
devastating.
it was horrible.
Hmm.
Um, had a little bitty hand in training Stevie Richards, but that was more some other guys too. J.R. Ryder, a few different guys over the years that have done a little something. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean,
There's a lot of ways in wrestling that you can stay involved and not have to kill yourself in the ring. So
absolutely. And I think that the more jobs that are available and are open in the business, it's very
yeah.
important to keep those around. And that's really the fascinating thing about the industry is that you don't have to be the one taking all the bumps. You could be doing commentary or booking or
And
whatever.
yourself, podcasts, this is certainly a growing area where, you can stay in touch with the business and stay in touch and, with folks, and people like yourself and people that love wrestling. And it's just that, that's the stuff you miss is the other people that love it, I guess.
Do
Uh,
you, do you get people that come up to you still, that remember you wanting to take pictures or
once in a while, yeah, they'd have to be pretty. I guess if they watched me growing up, which it's sometimes a little alarming how many people say that, like especially people who are now in the business, like will say, "Oh, I remember watching you. My dad took me to blah 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 in Philly, and we saw you guys all wrestle." Yeah, once in a while, not like it used to be. It used to be not terribly uncommon to be recognized, but now, a little bit, a little bit.
that's always
I'm
good.
again, I'm so fortunate that thanks to the internet, we're all immortal now. So, you know,
Yeah,
that's how I like to look at it.
it's definitely helped.
Yeah, for
Definitely
sure.
helped. Well, let's switch gears and talk about the stuff you've done outside of wrestling. You've worked with several different charities, different
Hmm.
organizations. What kind of stuff have you done in your community?
Most recently, I was volunteering with the homeless outreach program at my church. Uh, and that was really, I was there from day one with that initiative, and it's grown. I started there in 2021. I was there for about a year and a half, and it still goes on. The only reason I stopped is because I was having the last 3 years I've been doing a lot of sort of rebuilding myself, is like getting medical stuff done. So that kind of put a little um, glitch in it for a while. But I want to start going back in the spring. It's something that I watched grow, and I made such good friends. And everyone has a story, which is really interesting. And when you get around folks who are less fortunate, I would leave those lunches. They were every Wednesday, and every time I left, I felt so invigorated and so uplifted. Um, there's something that reaching people like that, people who are in need, it's really very rewarding. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to that for sure. There's a lady, she still goes, named Barbara. She liked to be called Mama, and she would motor around in her wheelchair and just live for these lunches. And she would come rain or shine. She'd come across town on her wheelchair, and she'd always see me and say, I always love to see you. It's so great to come and see you and be with everybody. That kind of stuff. Conversations I've had with people who are homeless but who like make jewelry or do something else or write music or something. Um, like I said, everyone has a story. Like these are people that a lot of them have had families and have had jobs and this, and they just lose it through any number of reasons. But yeah, I guess just being able to be with those folks and just talk and just have them kind of share their week with you. That's what they brought me in there for, was more to just kind of help with the lunches, but to also just kind of mingle and see if someone looks like they needed to talk or something like that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was really rewarding.
Why do you feel passionate about helping out in your community?
I've always been into the idea of paying it forward and giving back. And I think a lot of people, we don't live as gratefully as we should a lot of the time. And I think reaching out is very important as far as your own gratitude, but giving something. I was always the type of, like to give gifts rather than receive them, and it makes you feel good, to give back to the community that way and to be someone that people can talk to and confide in.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to be reliable and someone that needs a hand to reach out to them because you just never know. You never know
Yeah.
what somebody's going through in their life, and
Yes.
they need you, especially in today's society.
Yeah. We need to step back sometimes, I think, in our lives and let things process before we just react. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
and I find if we do that and have a little more compassion and say, okay, well, this person just did something or said something that upset me, just give it a sec, let the cool down. Like there's too much people yelling all the time at each other but not listening, So if you can get through to people, that's the main thing.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn, this has been wonderful. Getting the chance to speak with you it means a lot to me, and
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'll certainly tune in to other episodes because this is again, a great theme you've got going with this show.
thank you. And I believe we're like the first of its kind to really emphasize a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's a great bent on this whole thing. Are you a newer? It's a newer. I looked at your
Yeah,
website or your
yeah,
Facebook. It looks like it's kind of building though. That's great.
it is. We've been going since 2022, so
Fantastic. All right.
yeah, right
Nice.
on. But Glenn, thank you again for coming on. It
Oh,
means a lot to
my
me and my
pleasure.
listeners and viewers that are
Absolutely.
watching this on YouTube. Where can people find you on social media or any
But
websites?
yeah, best place is probably just my Facebook. It's Glenn Myra, Myhre, Osborne, Osbourne. That's Glenn with one N, but I guess it'll always come up. But Glenn Myra Osborne. You can feel free to drop me a line there. It's probably the best place.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's about it. But I'll definitely, keep up with you too.
awesome. Thanks again, and you're more than
Thank
welcome to
you.
come back. You're welcome. You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
You're,
And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
yeah, take
All right,
care.
Stanley. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.